The biggest and arguably the most important community tool, Elite Database, is shutting down. Easy to use tools to find gear, spaceships, tools, services, planned trade routes or travel paths among billions of star systems. Literally anything within Elite Dangerous that is not inside the game but is desperately needed is here. Or at least was here. One could even say that space sims like Elite Dangerous become unplayable without the tools and support from the community like this. Sadly then, seeing the biggest one of these helpful tools closing down is an extremely disheartening thing for all of us. So then, for the final goodbye, I reached out to the developer of Elite Database and asked a few things so that we all can have a great big farewell. I suppose it's prudent to start off this story from the beginning. Alright, Elite Dangerous is a fantasy game where you're piloting your mom across the galaxy, where everyone has such a good healthcare system that not even death could grasp you. Now that's what I call science fiction. But seriously though, if you're new to Elite Dangerous, the game has a massive sandbox with literally over 400 billion star systems to visit, and within each you can have all manner of things, including celestial bodies, stations, points of interest, random crack houses, you know, that kind of thing. But definitely not Raxla. It's not in the game. That's a lot of data. However, the game is built on a design principle that despite it being year 3300, such thing as internet just does not exist, despite the fact that faster than light travel is a thing. So each player will only see the data in their game from either the quote-unquote common knowledge base, that being one or two system information, that's about it, or the places that you've visited before. And I repeat, over 400 billion star systems with even more stuff inside them. And there is no sharing of data between players, so 400 billion and one you. Now developers say that the player has to go to places to discover what they hold, right? That's cool! Oh, and yes, this design principle of Elite Dangerous is genuinely retarded, and I mean it in the truest sense of the word. So then there's no wonder when Elite Dangerous spawns plethora of community-made tools that will help you play the game in the most basic level. You want to find out where to buy a simple common ship? Well, the game doesn't tell you, but the community tools do. You want to find out where to upgrade your ship? Well, the game doesn't tell you, but the community tools do. You want to plan out a simple A to B trading routes or find a place where to sell something? Well, the game doesn't tell you, but the community tools will. You want to see what celestial objects reside in a certain system? Well, the game won't tell you, unless of course you go there, but the community tools will. Basically, you get the gist. And of course, one of such community tools was Elite Database. I would easily say it is the best one of the bunch and highly integral, not only to enjoy Elite, but to even be able to play it in the first place. And so, I managed to contact the developer of Elite Database and ask him why is this phenomenally useful tool after 8 years of reliable, active service finally, sadly, closing its doors. Meet Demrock, a German web programmer who had single-handedly upkept and developed the most useful Elite Dangerous tool of all time. Elite Database was made in a few weeks over Christmas of 2014, right after the release of the game, and was available for the public around January of next year. It was and is still running on PHP and SQL, which is kinda both surprising and simple. Initial feature set, as Demrock told me, was a simple A to B trade tool that he rightfully identified as being missing from the game's feature set itself. A simple ability to look up what commodities are being sold in what station and for what prices, so that you don't need to go to each one of those thousands of starports just to discover the pricing on your own. I seriously want to slap the developers who still think that this design idea is even remotely okay, let alone smart. As Demrock noted, back then, the data wasn't really that readable from the game, and in fact they had to use literal screen-to-text reading software, but even that information, though a little bit faster than manually writing it in, was still prone to some errors, and data often needed to be corrected manually. And that, my friends, is gonna be a thematic throughout this story. However, Elite Database, being one of the first and more so really well made tools at the time, quickly garnered its notoriety, and by the first year became, as TheYamiks says, the default tool for everyone to use. Now, for those wondering how impactful the database was, well, at its peak around the Epic Store free-to-keep release of Elite Dangerous, the page views reached around 7 to 8 million views a month. Over the lifetime of Elite Database, it was viewed around 200 million times. And though it was not necessary to make an account to use it, there were still about 150,000 accounts created. Holy crap, I only have about 120,000 subscribers myself. It's amazing! And perhaps you can guess the most popular feature of Elite Database? Yep, that's right, it was how to and where to find a specific module or a ship, a module finder. Oh, and of course, let's not forget that in-game there is still no official tool to find what modules reside on what stations. Extremely simple, but hyper necessary. You know, I still remember back in 2015 learning how to play Elite Dangerous and using this tool for that very same purpose. It's both a golden gem of a feature for community tools and a massive shame stain for the developers of the game for not having added it. So then, this was Elite Database, a massive collection of highly useful and most of all basic tools that became not only nice to have but mandatory to even play the game. So much basic capability is still not available for Elite Dangerous, and if we were to ever lose these great community developers and their work, I fear Elite would become unplayable. But speaking of that, it did once happen. Now, if you snark at the prospect that, well, you surely don't need some sort of a website to play an immersive space game, you must be some kind of idiot who doesn't know how to play it, or maybe you're some sort of entitled prick who needs everything handed to you. Yeah, no. Back in 2017, every single major third-party tool developer collectively went on a strike for planned 3 days. It didn't even pass 12 hours before things got weird. After open letters asking for proper API and support to make lives for these toolmakers and players easier, and getting completely ignored by Elite Dangerous developers, they all decided to close down their tools. Elite Database, Coriolis, ED Shipyard, Dinara, EDSM, and more, all of them closed down and only displayed this message. Well, what happened afterwards was rather hilarious. You see, they only planned to be about 3 days offline, though every single player on PC or console, well, all of us, right? We were using these tools so much, we relied on this information and usability of these tools so much that going back to just using in-game tools, or rather lack thereof, well, nearly halted any activity, and it became very, very clear how unplayable Elite really was. Now, it didn't take them 3 days. In mere hours, if not minutes, the then Elite Dangerous community manager, Ed Lewis, let me editorialize a little bit and say, begged them to resume the services going, and of course promising support and of course communication from the developer's side, which they did come through with eventually, but as TheYamiks mentions it, it was just acceptable enough, and we'll talk about that. Basically, the problem with a lot of these tools is that data doesn't come in clean and often needs parsing out in order to actually tools not spewing out bad results. I myself have experienced this in some simpler tools like where to find module X. I go there and, well, it's not there because, well, the tool was spewing out wrong results. But that wasn't the toolmaker's fault. This was also very apparent with the trading and mining commodity pricing accuracy both for EDDB and Inara just a few years back, and even today. Now, fundamentally, there's no one else to blame or point fingers to but the developers of Elite themselves for these problems. The API should and could be better, easily, but I suspect that management is yet once more tinkering with the approval and provision of this support and communication between the parties. Simple fact is that these community tools had become so integral and important, no, necessary, because the base game does not offer the better alternative, or worse, any alternative at all. Some of this is truly due to retarded game design principles, others due to unforeseen features that they simply didn't think to implement. But, that's kinda the thing. Even before 2017 strike, it was clear how useful and used the third-party tools really were. And that was done without access to the source code or the stuff the developers actually have. So copy-pasting them in should be easier than ever, really. So why weren't they put in the game? Well, now that question I think you can answer yourself. Now then, returning to the 2017 strike, even afterwards it seems that Frontier had done bare minimum to appease the community developers, and this behavior is not unique to that single time either. And that's kind of the thing, we as creators also tried doing something similar to that. Really, we came together to make some sort of good positive change, trying to communicate with the developers a little bit more, even making an open letter, but well, we basically got the same sort of treatment that API developers did. And well, that kind of paints a specific MO through the ages for this company. But let's return to Demrock and his stuff. He also mentioned that after the expanded API introduction, some of the features just didn't quite work right for Elite Database, mostly due to faulty data, so cleaning up was still taking a lot of effort and his time. However, despite my rantings here about Frontier developments and their poor choices overall, Demrock insists that it's not their fault for shutting down the Elite Database. See, while chatting with Demrock, he time and time again mentioned that as time passes, interests change, life changes, and he had to move on himself. There are other things that he wanted and needed the time to do, and after 8 long years, he had made the decision to finally put an end to it. So, as of 8th April 2023, the best third-party tool, the integral part of Elite Dangerous, the Grand Elite Database, is shut down for good. And of course, questions many people have on their minds were obvious. Why not keep it running? Why not let someone else do it? Why not just let it function and abandon maintenance? Now, Demrock tried to address this in his statement, but it all comes down to a simple couple things. First, if he doesn't maintain it, the data gets outdated and worst of all, may even just be wrong altogether. So, this means that there is really no half measures here. Either you keep it updated and maintained, or you shut it down. And as for the second thing, well, okay, let's say you just hand down the code for someone else to maintain, right? Well, now this one's a tough one. You see, as Demrock mentions, it's hard to find somebody who would be with the technical know-how and passion enough to continue work on it that he'd trust to. And sure, while there is an argument to be made about taking responsibility about this magnificent and highly crucial tool that has become integral for the game, today luckily it's not the only one. And besides, for how long can you really expect somebody to do this hobby for, really? Remember, this is Demrock's leisurely project he made for the sake of the community, so sooner or later this would have happened nonetheless. And indeed, what a ride this tool, this community has had together. So I can't but to say thank yous enough. Now, I remember when I first played the game in 2015, I went on Reddit just to learn how to play a little bit and ask a couple of things, and somebody mentioned EDDB. It was just that, EDDB. Is that a fish? Is that a disease or something? But no, quick googling later quickly revealed what it was, and boy was it good! I quickly realized how amazing it is to see and find all the best upgrades for my Vulture that I used at the time, and this is also how I found my home station, the Cook Orbital in Chipiapurs. It had most everything I needed. Later down the line I started making content for the game and it became an indispensable tool, and I guarantee my videos wouldn't have been half as good without EDDB. Frankly, it feels like a simple thank you is not enough. The amount of support it gave not only to me, but to every single one of us is indescribable. There aren't enough words to express the gratitude for the work, help, and knowledge you provided, for the time and fun gameplay you've enabled. For all of that, I am, hell, all of us are grateful. Demrock also had last words to share too, and he wanted most of all to thank Elite's community for everything. the amazing community, developer family, the supportive users and friends made along the way on this near decade of a journey, and for Elite Dangerous developers, he wanted to encourage them to make more guided experiences for the game. And so, from all of us, thank you.